From Bold Gold Studios in Liberty, New York, welcome to another episode of Eye On Sullivan. I am Mike McGuire. I am the host of your show, joined each week as I am today by the chairman, Rob Doherty. Rob, good afternoon. How we doing?
Oh, good. Yourself, Mike? We have a special guest today. I don't know if you know that.
We do have a special guest, and we'll bring him in just a minute. But before we get started with that, we've started to get lots of very positive feedback about this
everywhere I go.
Show. People are talking about it. And we are, again, thankful to the crew here at Bold Gold Studios. They do a first-class job with it. But we really want to know what the listeners think, and we want to know what the listeners would like to hear, because this is a podcast that we've put together to talk about the people, places, and events that affect everyone here in Sullivan County. We had Mike Taylor here. We talked about the budget last week. We're going to talk about the budget some more now that the legislature has actually voted on it. But again, we want to hear what the listeners think, and we welcome all comments. And we would invite you to contact us at Eye On Sullivan. That's EYE on Sullivan at gmail.com. Let us know what events you may have in your town that you want to have us help you promote. We want to know what guests you think might be interesting for the people of Sullivan to hear, and what topics you would like us to discuss and to help you get a greater understanding. We're not here to try to influence how you vote. We want you to better understand how your county is run, how your laws are made, and how events are put together that may be of interest to you. So, again, that's Eye On Sullivan, EYE on Sullivan at gmail.com. And with that, we are very, very happy to have a special guest here today, as we are going to talk more about the budget process. And we had George Conklin last week, and now it is my pleasure and my honor to bring in the former legislator from District 3, that's the northern part of the county, Roscoe and Neversink, Grahamsville area, Mike Brooks. Mike, welcome to Eye On Sullivan.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to see you guys again. It's been a while, and
I was thrown in that you were the former vice chair also, but that's just me. That's just me.
I miss this. So no, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for allowing me to come and share this experience with you guys.
So I want to get some more insights into the budget that was recently passed, and Mike, of course, was very instrumental as the vice chairman in the past, and how goals were set and how appropriations were made. But before we do that, the project that Mike was really most identified with was the broadband project. And obviously, bringing broadband to Sullivan County is critically important. We have parts of our county that has no internet access, and that affects the property values. Not only that, it affects people's ability to work remotely.
Correct. And
really affects people's ability to be tuned in to the world, because everything is internet-based right now. So, Mike, you want to give us a quick update on what, if anything, is happening? We entered into a contract with Archtop while I was employed by the county, and you were part of the leadership of the county. And I know Archtop is a good company with lots of experience. Why don't you bring us up to date on what, if anything, is happening with that?
Well, from what I understand, because obviously I'm not in those meetings anymore, but there's an agreement that the legislature is looking to have, or the county is looking to have, with Archtop, a 10-year agreement. Now that the BEAD funding has come down from the state and it's been awarded, it was a joint application between Archtop and the county. And, that's how, when we first met Archtop, literally there were 4 people. And I think you were right in there at that meeting, Rob.
Yep.
And it goes to show that what you can do with four folks who had experience in the business, and with some backing and a vision, and come to a county. We were the first ones that Archtop signed a public-private partnership with. Since then, they have signed multiple agreements. And I've been told by them many times that we're the template by which they used going forward. And with the funding, you know what? I don't want to get too far adrift here because there's a lot has changed.
That's new.
You know, but I get passionate about things, especially when it comes to broadband. The project changed multiple times, you know, in the last few years. Early on, there was no archtop.
Correct.
And we were looking to make use of the county-owned towers, 8 of them.
Correct.
And as a way to quickly get broadband out there.
And that was going to be wireless.
That was going to be
It was
wireless.
gonna be wireless, and we were pretty much all set to go on that project.
About 95% coverage we would have gotten.
Correct, and there was a lot of advantages to going that way. And you know, one of the things that Mike touched on was, you know, when Archtop came to us, you know, the professionals that are involved in that company, they've done some amazing things in other countries and, you know, in the United States. And you know, when they say the template, you know, that was because the legislature, myself, Mike, the county manager, the county attorney's office, and Archtop, you know, worked at this, you know, on a weekly basis on how to form. See, there's funding that counties can get that private companies cannot get. So, you know, by having a public-private partnership, you know, they can bring expertise to the table, and the county can bring, you know, certain amounts of funding to the table through, you know, grants that they're able to get, but, you know, private companies are not able to get. And so when you're working together, you know, everyone has to leave their ego outside the room, and you're just trying to work together. You know, I talk about this all the time. It's like being in a football stadium, and when you're leaving, right, we're going to meet at that goal post over there, and everyone takes a different route to get there. But at the end of the day, you wind up where you want to be. And that's how it works in these meetings. You know, everyone's trying to get to that goal post, but, you know, you take different routes. But at some point, you all have to come together and agree on the goal. And that's one thing that, you know, Mike did an excellent job of defining the goal. And in those meetings, you know, it was clear where our goals were. Archtop defined their goals. Our goals matched. And then we went to work putting that all together, which was, you know, a testament to how the county worked together back then.
Well, and the truly exciting part of Archtop coming on is, as Mike said, we were looking at wireless broadband to try to bring service to some of the remote areas of the western part of the county along the river corridor. Good. And Archtop came in, and they were prepared and are prepared to create a backbone right down the Route 97 corridor and bring fiber optic right to high-speed fiber optic right to the people's homes.
Correct.
Which would mean that there would be no dead spots.
There would be zero.
Tremendous coverage and great internet speed at those houses.
Correct. Which again, like you had said, you know, changes the values of the properties there. You know, it's just better for work. It's better for school. I mean, you know, you'll hear stories about, you know, during COVID, you know, kids in Neversink and kids down in the river corridor couldn't do their homework because they were sending homework over the internet, and they couldn't get the internet.
We had people that were sitting in Peck's parking lot to do their homework.
Or their neighbors that had Wi-Fi. They
Right.
pull up the car. And no, it's
crazy.
You know, people can be very creative, but, you know, Sullivan County, you know, we need to – I just always wanted to see Sullivan County lead on some of these things and not be behind. And, you know, with the advent of Archtop coming into the picture, I was so grateful for that because, you know, how were we going to do this? How were we going to sell service? And that was a big question that we were tackling. And when I talked to the chamber and other folks, hey, are you guys going to be competing against private business? Like, no, that's not the intention. So with Archtop coming in, that public-private, man, that fit like a glove. And, you know, obviously the needs have shifted a little bit. High-speed broadband is still a need. Fiber to the home is fantastic. But obviously there's been build-outs by Spectrum. There's other folks involved. Starlink is now a lot of people have Starlink.
Yeah, but again, you know, I called up about Starlink at my house, and so you know, they quickly take a picture. You know, you give them the address, and then they take a picture of your house. And you know, I live on a pretty big field, you know, where I live, and you know, they're like, oh, there's some trees here, there's some trees there, and you can only get 60%. You know, where it made me think about, Archtop then with the wireless, with the wire right into your home, which I always think is the best way.
That's the ideal way when you can have a connection right inside your home, especially when it's fiber optic, and the immensity of the size of that information pipe, the data and the voice and everything that can travel over.
Because I still say, I live in Mongauk Valley, and I still cannot make a phone call in my driveway. I have to go inside. If my wife's outside gardening or anything like that, and I want to call her, she doesn't get the call. She has to go inside for her phone to work. And this is 2024, and that still happens. That was the goal, was to get past that. And, it looks like they're making great strides in that, and the funding obviously is part of that.
Now, and what's very significant about this is when both of you ran for office in 2019, you campaigned on a promise to address the lack of service countywide for high-speed internet. And then when you came into office, that was part of your plan.
Correct.
And you, as the chairman, Rob, you almost immediately put a committee together to work on it. It wasn't just a promise and then nothing happened. There was a plan and there was a direction right from day one.
Well, I ran to govern. I'm not that great at campaigning, but I'm really good at governing. And, where unfortunately, currently we have a lot of people who were very good at campaigning, but not very good at governing.
Or maybe they're not no interest in governing.
And to that point, I think
you're being kind.
Early on, when Rob and I first got to know one another, when we were running the first time, and we had many a morning inside diners talking, and one of the things that really it was so nice to hear from somebody that was running and had the passion for the county, but was just that, to get things done. And I think, it's the proof is in the pudding. We got an awful lot done. So, but I just want to go back to broadband real quickly. This is a great first step, but it's not the last step, because this is a building block. And right now, if you don't have access to high speed, it's coming. But also now you have a competition. Competition's great because it's sorely needed in this business. And secondly, this can be a springboard for other technologies to come into the county. Once you have a high-speed broadband network across the county, whether it's wired or wireless, because they're still going to use wireless in some areas, that you can do a lot of things. Public safety, maybe there's some other technologies that I haven't thought much about Sullivan County, but now that we are growing that way, maybe we can attract something. And I think it can only help the college and other things who are struggling at times. So.
Well, when we're talking about technology, we're talking about an ever-changing dynamic. There's never an end step when it comes to technology, because 3 months from now, whatever was state-of-the-art is on the verge of being obsolete.
AI is the big talk, but now all of a sudden quantum computing hit last week, and here we go.
I mean, you guys are a little bit older than me, but I remember when, VCRs were a big thing, right?
I remember when the Betamax was what everybody wanted.
Yeah.
And it was the battle between VHS and Beta.
I mean, before I even got to realize what CDs were, we were off to something else, and I was like, I'm still on CDs. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
So I want to, with that in mind, I want to get into where the legislature is right now. And again, we're not here for political purposes. We're here to give the folks in Sullivan County a better insight into the way the county government works, because probably most people don't really focus on that. So they had a meeting last Thursday, and
well, there was two meetings. There was one on Tuesday.
Well, that was a public hearing.
Yeah, and there was a public hearing there, and then they had a budget meeting on Thursday. Correct.
And the first thing that jumped out at me was it was a special meeting. And I
there was
remember,
nothing special about that.
Well, it was special. I remember vividly when people who are now on the legislature, who last year and before that were in the audience, regularly commenting on how we should never have special meetings.
Well, you can't run a county like that.
Of course not. So let's start from the macro and try to get some comments from both of you.
Okay, so one thing I want to preface the comment, let's
Sure.
create a baseline.
Sure.
Okay, one, it's a $301 million budget. Okay.
The biggest ever.
Okay. Sales tax, your tax went up by, I believe, 2.54, which is the max to the cap. And we never hit our cap one time in our 4 years. But they went to the cap, the absolute top they could go. Okay, even during COVID, we did not go to the absolute top. They're up $3 million in sales tax, according to against budget, right? So Josh makes a budget a year out in advance, okay, and then obviously the year unwinds. So we go, it's a little different. Our fiscal year, goes through March, and then but your calendar year doesn't match up with our fiscal year, so everyone understands that. And so Nancy Buck, the treasurer, stands up in the meeting before and says that she said, Brian and Joey said I'm wrong, but I know I'm right. And if I was to bet money on whether Nancy Buck was right about sales tax or Joey and Brian were right, I'm going to go with Nancy Buck 1,000 times out of 1,000.
We could go to the sports book then, Monticello, but I think that the betting odds will strongly favor Nancy.
Correct. So they're up $3 million, and they still went to the cap. I want you to understand that. And the other thing that they did was they raised your garbage rates by over 20%, which doesn't seem like a lot. Why does that bother me? I have municipal garbage, or I have, it doesn't matter. Any piece of garbage that's in this county has to go to the transfer station. Someone has to pick it up and take it there, okay? And that just costs you 20% more to do so. But by doing that, they never addressed the true problem in it, and that is the transfer stations throughout the county. Now, Bethel and Neversink are the only two townships that own their transfer stations, and they run them privately. So I know Neversink operates the same way that Bethel does, but we'll go to Bethel. So it's maintained by Bethel, the land is owned by Bethel, and the employees are Bethel. They take in money for people who drop off garbage. You have to be a Bethel resident. There's little stickers that you put in your window, the whole deal. You have a permit. And at the end of the year, we lose about $25,000 doing that.
Bethel does.
But the Bethel does. And I called Chris Matthews, and he said that Neversink loses about $25,000. You want to guess what we lose in Coshecton and in Rockland? Plus, keep in mind there's 6 other townships that have them. Over $100,000 each as a county. So why aren't we addressing the fact that these towns are not running their own transfer stations, and we're still paying for it? We as a taxpayer are paying for it, and then we as garbage, people who have garbage service, we're paying 20% more there.
Well, now, this is a good jumping off point. When we talk about Coshecton, for example, not only is the county eating that loss, but I believe the county is also paying rent to the town of Coshecton for the luxury of accepting their garbage.
So they paid Coshecton and the town of Rockland, and they stopped that in this budget going forward. So they saved the taxpayers $10,000, but they should save them somewhere in the neighborhood of about $600,000 by ending all of them. Basically, there's one in Highland, there's one in Mammacane, there's one in Calhoun, there's other townships that have them, and basically say, you want to run it, you run it, have a nice day, but if you don't want to run it, we're not running it anymore. Why should we, as taxpayers in other townships that have their own garbage facilities, why should we have to pay for other townships?
So we have a $301 million budget,
Correct.
Which is the highest we've ever had.
By a mile.
By a lot. We have a tax increase covered up in garbage by increasing the tipping fees. That's a tax because everybody's got garbage.
Correct.
You're not processing your own garbage and saving that money. And you've got a 2.5% tax levy increase.
Correct.
And we talked about that last week, what
Correct.
that means. And this is in a situation where sales tax, as George pointed out last week, has now eclipsed the property tax levy. So we generate more money through sales tax than we do through property taxes.
So one of the things real fast is when George was the head of management and budget for 4 years, which is a very powerful committee, and if you do your job properly, you can get a lot out of it. They would bemoaning the fact that the budget was so high. These are the legislators. They would bemoaning the fact that that they went to the cap. But what they didn't do was govern. They did not hold one budget meeting with one department one time.
So that's pre-2020.
Well, no. In 2024.
Oh, this year. Okay.
Yeah. This year, they did not hold. Well, just to be fair,
right.
In the legislature before Mike and I, they didn't do that either, and they broke the cap their first year and then overspent their revenues 3 years in a row. That's
right.
what prompted me to run. This legislature did the chair of the management budget, who I believe is Brian McPhillips, did not hold one meeting, and he bemoans the fact at the end of the vote and says, "Well, we're going to do that next year." Well, you were hired for a 4-year term. So if you didn't do your job this term, do you give the money back, or we're just going to assume that you're going to do your job going forward?
And again, the model was there under George's leadership.
Absolutely.
Where right from 2020, we had several days of budget hearings where
Correct.
people would come in public, folks, in a public meeting,
Yep.
and go through their budget and provide an opportunity for all the legislators to question their requests.
Correct.
And it was mostly the bigger departments that do carry the majority
Sheriff,
of the budget.
DPW, places
Family
like that.
services.
Yeah. The
So-
DA.
The DA, right.
So from a macro view,
Mm-hmm.
it's always about priorities of legislators, right? And legislators, quite frankly, can engage or disengage at will, right? They just can.
Sure.
And
Oh,
been
yes.
around long enough and seen it.
So, Mike, we started at the meeting with a discussion of the capital plan. And I'm not sure that the legislators all understood that the capital plan and the budget are two different things. Like, can you give us the idea of what the difference is between the capital plan and the budget and how they're supposed to interact with one another?
Well, the capital plan is looking out. It's looking forward.
5 years.
5 years, absolutely. And you have the meetings and you talk with folks as well, the department heads, the legislature, and you come up with a plan. We have a lot of buildings, need a lot of work.
And that plan should reflect the objectives and the goals of the legislature.
Absolutely.
Correct. So one of the things I remember my first year. So in the sheriff's department, they have hundreds of vehicles. Okay, and I remember talking to the sheriff, Mike Schiff, and it was during COVID, and he was like, and I don't want to seem greedy here. I only need 5 new vehicles. I'm like, Mike, your capital plan calls for 8 new vehicles. And he said, Rob, it's COVID. I feel bad about doing this. So the previous chairman, to me, had a lease on a car. It was a Ford Expedition, I believe.
Correct.
And, I refused to drive it because I didn't think the taxpayer should pay for the car I drive. So I gave the money for the lease and the vehicle to the sheriff so that he would be able to reach the 8 vehicles. Remember that in your office?
Sure. In fact, we sat in the county attorney's library when we went through that. And what was interesting is that the capital plan, we want to get back to Mike on this, the capital plan provided for a turnover of 40 vehicles through the life of the capital plan, which is 5 years. It's 8 a year.
Correct.
He was asking for 5. Well, Mike, you're going to either create a situation where some year we've got to buy 11.
Correct.
Or that you're not going to meet the goal, and we were in year 1. So Mike, to get back to you, so that's the capital plan is your 5-year projection of where are we going. Mm-hmm. We've got to get to California. How are we going to get there? Well, we got to cross Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana and on. That's the 5-year plan. And how does that compare to the budget? And then how should the two of them intersect?
Well, you need to keep your eye on the ball, 5 years going forward, and what you want to do along those 5 years. And the annual budget, the process, the meeting, and what you finally decide on as a legislature is so important to getting there, because if you go off the rails,
willy-nilly,
your word, willy-nilly, it just makes it hard to reach that goal. And
Correct.
And just think about some of the things. I'm just going to talk about buildings for a minute. I mean, look at the government center. How old is that building? Goes back to the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that have been done, but there's a lot more that's got to come. So every year, I'll give a personal. I live out in Neversink. The last 3 years, the county portion of my town tax bill, last 3 years, if I remember right, combined, went down over 30%. So just think about that and what we were able to do, and that's tax relief to the
Correct.
the residents, and we were able to do Sullivan Promise, and we were able to create a trades program. Those types of things, and meanwhile, taxes were going down. It's the formula. It's a tax levy. I think you guys went into that. But it's just, that's remarkable to me when I go back and I looked at my tax bills. And it's like, you know what? That's is it nothing? That's something. And I think it's how you prioritize, keeping your eye on that that 5-year plan that's laid out. And there's an awful lot of work that goes into that and man hours. But that's the only way your government's going to run effectively, if you have that plan, and then each year that you go into the budget process, that you keep that in the back of your mind.
Most legislators have no idea what that is.
And where do you want to go? How do you get there?
The reason we were so successful was because the core of us, me, you, and George, truly understood what that plan was. And so when we're going through the budget, so give you a prime example, Ed McAndrew, the head of DPW, has a chart in his office of how many miles they have paved for 35 years in the county.
Yep.
Okay. And if you look at if you look at 19, 18, 17, and 16, they were the lowest 4 years combined. Not only that, they didn't do the side work. They weren't fixing culverts. They weren't doing the other construction, it's called. They weren't doing that, and they weren't prepping roads in advance, and they were bonding for roads. We went 4 years, and our 4 years was the most we've ever done before, because we were trying to catch up. But the problem with catching up in Sullivan County is it's cold. I mean,
Yeah.
It starts off cold. You get some cold days even into May. You have to wait for the
Blacktop plants to open.
And you're hoping that they stay open pretty late. But guys, they have to turn to snow at some point, so they have to stop doing the paving. But we were able to, because we were looking at the plan, we were looking at the 5-year plan, and we were saying, okay, we have to get this many done this year, and this is how we're going to fund this. And we talked about the East Broadway project and other projects, and that was all part. So when you're having conversations about, okay, we're going to pave 27 roads this year, we're going to fix 5 culverts, and we're going to prep 28 miles next year, that's all in a conversation of our plan is to do 120 miles over a 5-year period, or a 4-year period, or whatever it may be. And you have to constantly have that. I didn't hear that mentioned one time in the meeting last week.
It wasn't, and it was clear to me that they were confusing capital projects with a capital plan. A capital project still needs to be funded through the budget.
Correct.
And one of the things that jumped out at me was they talked about the ACC. And we know that that's been a political situation over the last number of years, created by people who didn't really understand that Sullivan County has no expertise in running a hospital.
Just so we're clear, when I came into office, 16 counties still owned a nursing home. When I left office 4 years later, 6 counties still owned a nursing home. Everyone else has divested themselves of it. when a county divests themselves of a nursing home, that does not mean the nursing home goes away. It's now run by people who are professionals at this. We were not professionals.
You know, if I think when a person decides he wants to run for the legislature, and I think one of the questions is, where do you want to take the county? And then how do you get there? And,
Correct.
you know, the ACC, you know, that was quite a hot topic for our tenure in there. And, you know, but if you want to, Sullivan County is if you're looking to, as I always was, to elevate Sullivan County.
And that's the goal.
Elevate on all fronts. And to do that, and that's the broadband, that's education, that's bringing jobs here. Want to be more than just a place where people go and vacation. And I think we can. But that doesn't just happen by wanting it. It's having your eye on that plan and being fiscally prudent, and then have that vision, working with the county manager's office and so on and so forth, to bring a county, you know, there. And you know, and it'd be interesting if you asked past legislators or current legislators, you know, what is your vision of the county? Because I think that would be an interesting answer. And then how do you get there?
Well, the answer would probably be for most of them to get reelected.
Correct. So one of the things Mike just said was working with the county manager's office, and I just chuckled because you had the chairman of the legislature sitting up there asking questions about salaries, where it was clear she had never read that budget at all. I mean, this was like a first read-through for her because she happened to be sitting up there, and she didn't understand what the old salary was and what the new salary was. And the funny thing about that is the new salary has a header that says new on it. So everything underneath that would be new. And you know, was just calling people out for what they make in public, which is, you know, crazy. I mean, that's crazy to me.
So in the discussion on a capital plan, which is a 5-year plan, that's
Correct.
revisited each year. So you're making some progress, you're going out another 5 years. They were fixated on work that needed to be done at the ACC. Now, I remember in 2020, one of the things we raised one of the things you raised when we were looking at divesting ourselves was not only the losses that the county was taking operationally, but we have a physical plant that's going to need a lot of money coming down the pike in 5 or 6 years.
Correct.
So having not giving it any attention in this whole budget cycle, they talk about $3 or $4 million, and one of the legislators, oddly enough, the one that took over for George Conklin, makes a comment that demonstrates very little insight into how things are done when she says that, well, we had a grant. If we hadn't transferred the ACC ownership to the LDC, we would have had a grant, been able to get a grant to pay for the air conditioning units on the roof. Well, when we transferred it to LDC on a 7-2 vote,
Correct.
we weren't supposed to own it
Correct.
any longer.
Correct.
But it was 2 sitting legislators and 1 retired legislator that actually went to Albany to argue against the group that the legislature and the public played a very intricate role in selecting the operators.
Correct.
But what was very disturbing, and I want to get comments from both of you on this, is that they looked at the capital plan as a 1-year plan,
It's not.
and the chairman of management and budget said, well, we'll use fund balance for that. So we're not going to work it into the budget as part of our goal. We're going to just use fund balance. It's like you've left them with a blank check and they're committed to spending it.
So when I came into office, we were in unencumbered monies. We were at $14 million. When I left office, it was $82 million. I was hoping it to be $83 million, but that's a bone of contention between me and my friend Michael Brooks, but
We're still both very fiscally prudent, though.
correct. So
Burr is still in the saddle. Mike, we can hear that.
So we, so by, again, going back to, Mr. McGuire's point is that by understanding the budget, understanding what a capital plan is, and understanding that every budget has, capital projects inside of it, that you can plan accordingly. When you have no idea of the difference between your capital plan, your capital budget, and your normal budget, you are going to go nowhere. You are going to go, this legislature will run through that $82 million within the next budget cycle. We'll be bonding money again. When we came into office, myself, Mr. Brooks, and Mr. Conklin both said we are not bonding a dime. We did not bond one dime while we were in office, and we paid off $26 million early. They weren't due yet, and we were paying them off to get them down, to get the county in the best financial shape it's ever been in. And I know I say it all the time, and people seem to say, well, that's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal because it affects the taxes. A lot of the people that live here are retired people. A lot of people that live and work here, can't afford another $500,000 in taxes, especially if you live in a village. Now you're getting village taxes, and most of the infrastructure in most villages is very old and needs to be changed, and those taxes are going up.
So, Mike, at least 4 legislators that are currently on the board ran on a primary platform of bringing the ACC, the Adult Care Center, back under the ownership umbrella of the county. Mm-hmm. And now they've been there for a full year and still made no plans within the budget for 2025
Correct.
to make the necessary repairs. We're back to bonding for roads, Mike.
Yeah, no, look, there was my last day on the legislature, I got a visit by a person who's still on the legislature, and we were talking about the ACC. And they were coming to the realization that we got to sell this. It's like, yes, we do. And I said, look, I said, think of it this way. The county really has no business being in that business. We don't do it well. It's a burden on the taxpayer. What was it, $20 million?
It was $1 million a month we were losing.
There you go. And just think about that, $1 million a month losing. And the Infinite Care, who was brought in by quite an extensive process of vetting folks that were interested in leasing.
And I might add, too, parenthetically, is that the winner of that bid, Infinite Care, was not the chairman's primary target. Right?
No.
I mean, he favored a different company. So for all the folks that talk about how the other members of the legislature were just Rob's puppets.
Oh, no.
That's not two of the biggest votes that you had in 4 years went against what Rob wanted.
And that,
correct.
And that
and the legislative maps.
Yeah,
right.
and that operator
wanted.
Basically bought that nursing home in Ulster County, our neighboring county,
Correct.
from the county, and is running, and by all accounts is doing an excellent job doing that, which is what we wanted, to have an operator come in that this is what they do, and that they would do that here. There is a mindset out there, and it baffles me that a public entity, number one, we belong at a public entity belongs in some of these businesses running it, and to think that a public entity can do a better job than a private entity is just where has it ever worked? It just does not work. It freed the county up to do a few things, and I said to this legislator that was in my office, I said, look, there's companies that can do a much better job servicing that need in our county. We can take that money, $1 million a month. Just think about that. That number is huge, and turn that money that we're losing into something else. Like how about our kids? The Sullivan Promise, the college, trades, things that we can do to develop here. And I basically said that this allows us to do a lot of that. So it's when I go back to where do you want to bring as a legislator? Where do you see Sullivan County? How do you want to get there? What are the things you want to do? In my view, and Rob's and others, is just this is something we shouldn't be doing, and it's costing us an awful lot of money. There's other things that we can focus on that we're better able to do. Let's bring an operator in that can do a better job than us there, and it's a win-win for the residents of the county on a couple fronts, whether it's taxes, service, what have you. And so
one of those things that we did with the extra money is we expanded Move Sullivan to all 5 major townships
And made it free.
And if you've noticed, since we've done that, the unemployment rate continues to be one of the best unemployment rates in the region, because now people from everywhere in the major townships, Fallsburg, Mamakaden, Liberty, Thompson, Bethel, can now get to school and get to work and get groceries. And that has changed the face of Sullivan County, I'm hoping forever, because now there's more people that are employed in the county because they can get on a bus and get to work. Before the cabs were killing them before.
And that benefits both ways, because identifying and securing a workforce was a problem for the employers.
Correct.
And finding jobs was a problem. What we had was folks sitting in Liberty, Fallsburg, Monticello, Grahamsville, Roscoe, wanting to work but couldn't get there.
Correct.
And you had employers across the county wanting employees.
Correct.
And they couldn't get them. Rob, one of the issues that was very important to you right on in your administration, right from the start in 2020, was to get our labor force upgraded and get these contracts settled.
Correct.
And when you left, where were we with the contracts?
Okay, I was the only chairman ever to have all 8. So there's 8 labor contracts. When I came in, there were 9 labor contracts.
I think we had one union that dropped off.
That dropped off. That whether it be the nurses, Teamsters, the PBA, CSA, LIU. I mean, there's
probation.
Probation. There's a bunch of them. So there's 8 of them. Every union, the contract, the vote to secure the contract was every single union was over 90%, and everyone had multiple years left on their contracts the day I left office.
So one of the discussions under the amendments was an increase in salary for the deputy county manager.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the legislators, I think it was actually the chairman of the legislature, was opposed to it because we need to have money for our union employees, which is obviously important. It was important to you.
Yes.
But we just settled those contracts. And, Mike, shouldn't any discussion of salary increases or renegotiating contracts take place before you go to the final vote on the budget? I mean, isn't it kind of late in the process to be raising that as the chairman of the legislature?
No, it's very late.
Not if that's the first time you've seen the budget.
Well, there is that.
No, it's very late, and the contracts are settled for. I mean, it's a process, and there's a reason, and there's timelines on that, and and you stay to that. It's look, everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to make more money, and legislators' job, obviously, one of their jobs is to keep that within reason, and pay people fairly within the confines of the budget, and always keeping the taxpayers in the back of your mind. I mean, it's quite a balancing act. You want to be fair, and you want to pay folks for what they are worth, but you have to be able to draw the line. And sometimes that's a tough thing.
So this deputy county manager still makes less than the previous deputy county manager. Still to this day makes significantly less.
And the prior one predates your election.
Correct.
So we're talking about 2017-18.
Correct.
When the prior one was here.
Correct. And the current, even with the raise, still makes less than the previous one. Just to be clear.
It was just remarkable to me that discussion was happening at a time when the legislators had a year to address their goals, because you inherit the budget the first year.
Correct.
But now I vividly remember 2020, where that whole year was spent making sure that the budget reflected the goals and objectives of the legislature from year one, because you've already lost a year, so really it would start in year 2.
Correct.
And go to year 4.
I did notice that the chairman did not say anything about the raise that I gave the new chairman coming in.
Correct.
And the vice chairman used to not make any money being the vice chairman. I made sure that the vice chairman made money. I made sure that the majority leader and the minority leader also got money for doing their jobs, and that every legislator received a raise, because you're only allowed to negotiate your salary one time as an elected official. So when you're an elected official, you have to negotiate your salary before you go into
Right.
office.
As of January 1st, when you take office, your salary cannot change during the period that
Correct.
you're elected.
Correct.
So it's usually done in that
Correct.
in that
And
last
so,
budget cycle.
So I had lost my election, and I could have easily been like, you know what, have a nice day. I really don't care. But that's not that's not how you manage things. You have to look forward all the time, and that's the problem that we're seeing now, is that this legislature is like the previous legislature to Mike and I, is that they're back in just looking 2 feet in front of them. They're not looking down the road. They're not understanding how all these things intersect with each other and why it's important to understand it all.
And I think one thing that's important, just to because we all have a foundation from which, when we run, our beliefs, fiscal conservatism, whatever, and that happened to be the common thread for George and Rob and myself. If you think back to COVID, in those early days of COVID, we had no idea what was happening at all, and some of the information that was coming down from the state as far as how it was going to affect, the budgets, and they were dark times.
And there was no ARPA money even talked about. I'm talking
Not
about
even-
February, March, April of 2020.
Those early
Correct.
days, and so I remember a few of us having this conversation and talking about the state's money and it was almost like a doomsday scenario, which would just literally bankrupt the county. I mean, we couldn't operate anything. So we came up with an energy tax, if you remember.
I do remember.
Now all of us are like, look, we don't like taxes. We certainly don't want to add one. But it's like, you know what? If we add a tax, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put a date on that tax, so it's going to sunset. And because I think that's the trust that you need to be able to have with your constituents. We did that. We sunsetted that early. And I think that just look, a lot of people can say things, but it's those actions and the result at the end of those actions that really, show the true measure. And I think that just was one of those things that demonstrated just how serious we were about fiscal responsibility and keeping things under control.
We were so serious about it that it was due to end much later than when it ended, because what we did do was our first year, like Rush Limbaugh says all the time, fiscal conservatism works every time it's tried. We were so successful in our first year, we were able to end the tax.
a year early.
A year early. So it was supposed to be a 2-year tax. We made it a 1-year tax, and then a year. So in our third year, we had a negative increase in taxes. So we were basically giving the money back to the people that they had spent on the energy tax.
So, folks, as you can see, it's a very complex discussion, and our objective here at Eye On Sullivan is to give you some insight, take you into the war rooms, if you will, take you into the locker rooms so you can understand the way that your government works. And, Rob, every week this hour passes
Man,
so
goes
quick.
by
I
fast.
think that Paul Siliberto is going to need to give us a daily show pretty soon.
I would think so.
I want to thank our special guest today, Mike Brooks. Hopefully Mike will come back because we want to keep tracking the broadband. It's so important, and Mike's got so much insight. He was president of the school board out in Tri-Valley for an extended period of time. I'd like to bring him back when we speak about the college and There are some real issues there at the college. And folks, again, if there are issues and events that you want to hear us talk about and help you walk through and get a better understanding of them, just drop us a line at eyeonsullivan@gmail.com. That's EYE on Sullivan@gmail.com, because we are keeping our eye on Sullivan County. Rob, any last words?
No, it's just glad to see Mike again. He just walked in here. I was like, all right, Mike's here.
No, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed this a lot, and no, it's great getting information out to folks. It's kind of what it's all about. So thank you.
So, folks, this is Mike McGuire on behalf of Rob Doherty, the chairman, and Michael Brooks today, thanking you for joining us for this episode of Eye On Sullivan. And remember, drop us a line at eyeonsullivan@gmail.com. That's EYE on Sullivan@gmail.com. Thanks, folks. Have a Merry Christmas. We'll be back after the Christmas break. There's no show next week, but on Spotify and on YouTube, you can catch all 5 episodes that we have. So you want to catch up so that you're right up to date with what we're talking about, and we will be back in 2025. Thanks, folks.